The Dominion never feared humanity. To them, Earth was just another primitive world to be conquered, another species to be bent to the will of the Archon. When the war came, the Dominion's fleets swept through the Sol system like a tidal wave, crushing human defenses and leaving the survivors to kneel or die. The psychic overlords thought they had buried humanity beneath the ashes of their own homeworld. They were wrong. Admiral Elias Voss stared at the holographic projection before him, watching the grainy recordings of Dominion outposts burning in the void. Ships, hundreds of them, torn apart mid-flight. Not by Dominion weapons, not by known enemies, but by something else, something unseen. Another station lost. His second in command, Commander Rourke, muttered beside him. That makes 8 this month. Voss said nothing. The Dominion's high command would be in an uproar by now. Something was attacking their supply lines, disrupting their war machine. Something that struck without warning, without leaving a trace. The Dominion called them ghosts. Voss called them justice. He turned to Rourke, his scared face illuminated by the flickering blue glow of the holodeble. Survivors? None. Good. The fewer witnesses, the longer the illusion would hold. The truth was simple. The Phantom Legions were no spirits, no supernatural force. They were the last secret remnants of humanity's once great fleet, reforged in the shadows, perfected with stolen Dominion technology. A decade of exile had given them time to study their enemy, to prepare to evolve. Their ships were equipped with phase-cloaking technology, an experimental hybrid of Dominion gravity shielding and human ingenuity. They could materialize just long enough to strike, then vanish before the enemy even knew they were there. To the Dominion, they seemed like specters, an invisible force of vengeance tearing through their empire. It was all part of Voss's plan. The Dominion had crushed Earth, but they had not crushed humanity. Orders, sir? Rourke asked. Voss studied the holographic display for a moment longer, watching the Dominion fleet movements. They were still trying to make sense of what was happening. Good. Confusion was their greatest weapon. Proceed with Operation Spectre, Voss said, his voice as cold as the void outside. Target the Dalzen Armory Station. Make sure nothing survives. Rourke grinned. A pleasure. With a flick of his fingers, Voss dismissed the hologram. As the lights of the command room dimmed, he turned toward the massive viewport, staring out into the endless black of space. The Dominion believed themselves invincible. They believed humanity had been broken. They had no idea what was coming. Across the galaxy, on the Dominion capital world of Jolun, Grand Archon Zalvath was growing restless. The throne room, an immense chamber carved from obsidian stone, pulsed with a dim violet light as Dominion officials knelt before their ruler. Their psychic presence flooded the room like static in the air, a collective network of fear and obedience. They were seen again, my Archon, one of the advisors stammered, his scaled hands trembling. The ghosts. Another outpost has fallen. Zalvath did not move. He sat upon his throne of blackened steel, his eyes glowing with psionic energy. When he finally spoke, his voice was a deep, vibrating growl. There are no ghosts, he said. Only enemies too afraid to face us in the light. Silence gripped the room. No one dared to contradict him. But Zalvath was not a fool. Something was attacking them. Something precise, efficient, deadly. For the first time in his long rule, he felt something unexpected. Not fear. No, never fear. But concern. A shadow war had begun. And for the first time in Dominion history, they were not the hunters. They were the hunted. A lone Dominion warship drifted through the darkness of the Dalzan sector, its hull scared and burning. The frigate had once been part of a mighty armory convoy, a fleet tasked with delivering weapons and reinforcements to the Dominion's border colonies. Now, it was nothing more than a shattered relic, a silent testament to the carnage that had unfolded just minutes ago. Inside, the few surviving crew members stumbled through flickering corridors, their taloned feet splashing through pools of blue Dominion blood. Sparks rained from shattered control panels. The ship's gravity flickered, making each step uncertain. Panic filled their telepathic link, a chaos of unanswered cries for help. High Warden Xarn clutched his side, pressing a shaking hand against the wound where shrapnel had torn through his carapace. He limped toward the ship's communication terminal, forcing his mind to focus through the pain. "High Command, this is Xarn," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "We were attacked. Not by pirates. Not by rebels. Something else. Something." A sound cut him off. A deep mechanical thunk. His mandibles clicked in terror as the overhead lights failed completely. The corridor was plunged into darkness. Then came the footsteps. Slow, measured, human. Xarn reached for his weapon, but it was too late. A gloved hand seized him by the throat, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. Through the dim emergency lighting, he could just make out the figure before him. A soldier clad in a matte black exosuit, its visor a smooth reflective surface. No insignia, no words, just a ghost. His last thought before the knife plunged into his throat was that the Dominion had underestimated humanity for the last time. Far away, aboard the Phantom Legion's flagship Oblivion, Admiral Elias Voss stood before his assembled officers in the war chamber. A massive tactical display hovered above them, showing the shattered remains of the Dominion fleet at Dalzan. Phase-cloaked human warships had torn through the convoy like hungry wolves, striking with perfect precision before vanishing into the void. The battle had lasted less than 15 minutes. A massacre. "The Dominion is still confused," Voss said, his voice calm, measured. "They don't know who's attacking them, and we will make sure it stays that way. They think they rule the galaxy, that no one can challenge them. Our job is to make them afraid." A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber. Commander Rourke leaned forward, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "How long until they realize it's us?" Voss's gaze was cold. Long enough. His officers knew what he meant. Humanity had been declared a broken species, a minor footnote in Dominion history. The Phantom Legions existed because the Dominion believed humanity had surrendered. They had spent years infiltrating Dominion networks, learning their supply chains, stealing their technology. Now, every strike they made was designed to look like something else. Rogue Dominion factions, rival species, cosmic anomalies. Anything but humans. "They will start retaliating soon," Rourke said, more serious now. "And when they do, they'll hit the wrong targets. That could unite them against us." Voss turned to the display, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls. A new target appeared on the map. Jalan Prime, the Dominion capital world. "They won't unite," Voss said, "because before they realize what's happening, we will rip out the heart of their empire." The room fell into silence. It was an impossible plan. Jalan was the most fortified world in the known galaxy, protected by countless war fleets and the Dominion's most elite psionic warriors. But Voss wasn't asking for permission. He was telling them what came next. The Phantom Legions would not stop until the Dominion was dust, and the first true strike would come soon. Very soon. Grand Archon Xalvath stood before a massive holographic projection of the Dalzan sector, his violet eyes burning with fury. The Dominion fleet had been eradicated, not defeated in battle, not driven into retreat, but wiped out with surgical precision. There were no distress calls, no survivors, just silence. A circle of high-ranking Dominion warlords stood in the throne chamber, their heads bowed in fear. The telepathic air between them buzzed with nervous uncertainty. "Who?" Xalvath's voice rumbled like distant thunder. His armored claws flexed, the light from the holo display casting jagged shadows across his throne. "Who dares strike at my empire?" Silence. Then one of the warlords, a lesser archon named Uzur, stepped forward hesitantly. "My lord, we believe it could be the Thalvani Cardinals. They'd been growing bolder, striking at our supply lines." A flicker of psionic power lashed out. Ushir collapsed instantly, blood running from his eyes, his body twitching as his mind burned to ash. The other warlords recoiled. Zelvath stood, his imposing frame radiating rage. "I do not want excuses," he snarled. "I want answers." The room remained still. No one wanted to be the next to die. The Grand Archon exhaled slowly, reining in his anger. He turned his gaze toward his High Inquisitor, Lord Valak, a twisted creature who had served the Dominion's secret intelligence for centuries. Valak was old, even by Dominion standards, and his mind was a labyrinth of cruelty. "Find them," Zelvath commanded. "Rip through the minds of every prisoner, every traitor, every pathetic insect that dares conspire against me. I want their name. I want their homeworld." Valak bowed deeply, his many cybernetic eyes flickering. "It will be done, my Archon." Zelvath sat back down, his claws tapping against the cold stone of his throne. He did not believe in ghosts, but something was hunting his empire, and for the first time in 1,000 years, it was bleeding. Deep within the void, far from the Dominion's reach, the Oblivion and the Phantom Legions drifted silently. Admiral Elias Voss stood in the command deck, watching as his fleet reformed after the successful strike on Delzan. His warships were not massive like the Dominion's towering dreadnoughts, nor were they equipped with planetary-scale weaponry. Instead, they were precise, built for ambush and sabotage. They were assassins. "The Dominion is starting to panic," Commander Orcs said, stepping up beside Voss. "Intercepted chatter says they've begun purges in their own ranks. Warlords turning on each other. No one knows who to trust." Voss allowed himself a small smile. This was how empires crumbled, not from open war, but from fear. "How long before they figure it out?" Rourke asked. Voss exhaled. "Not long." The Phantom Legion's attacks had been devastating, but the Dominion was vast. Sooner or later, someone would realize the pattern. "We need to escalate," Voss said. "Cut deeper. Take more than just ships." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "What's the target?" Voss tapped the holo display, zooming in on a critical point in the Dominion's communications web. "Zulun's psionic nexus." Rourke stared at him. "That's insane." "That's necessary," Voss corrected. "We take down the nexus. We cripple their entire psychic command structure. The Dominion won't just be blind. They'll be deaf." For a moment, Rourke said nothing. Then he grinned. "Well, Admiral, I do love a good suicide mission." Voss smiled back. "Then let's make history." The Phantom Legions were done striking from the shadows. It was time to break the Dominion. The Dominion capital, Jalun, was a fortress world unlike any other. It was a planet wreathed in storm clouds of psionic energy, its atmosphere thick with the psychic presence of billions of Dominion citizens, warlords, and enslaved telepaths who fueled the Empire's vast command network. At its heart lay the psionic nexus, a colossal structure of pulsing organic conduits and cybernetic relays. The nexus was the backbone of the Dominion's rule, allowing its rulers to communicate instantly across the stars, issuing commands with nothing but a thought. And now, the Phantom Legions planned to shatter it. Aboard the stealth cruiser Spectre, a team of elite human operatives prepared for infiltration. Clad in adaptive exosuits designed to blend seamlessly into their surroundings, they checked their weapons, ensuring their phase-cloaked blades and silenced energy rifles were ready. Captain Dax Voss, Elias Voss's younger brother, stood at the head of the strike team. He had been in the shadows for years, watching from the depths of Dominion space as humanity suffered. Now, vengeance was at hand. "All systems green," whispered Lieutenant Ria Jas, the team's cyber warfare specialist. "Once we breach the perimeter, I can overload their security systems, but we'll have a small window before they figure out something's wrong." Dax nodded. "Then we don't waste time." The ship glided through the darkened side of Jalun's orbit, undetected by Dominion patrols. The Phantom Legions had studied the Dominion's defenses for years, and they knew every blind spot. They would use them all. With a silent command, the team deployed. 6 figures ejected from the Spectre, their suits automatically adjusting their descent as they plummeted toward the Nexus. The Dominion's planetary shields covered most of the surface, but the Nexus had its own internal systems, ones that had to remain open to keep the Empire's communications flowing. That was where they would strike. As they neared their target, the operatives twisted midair, activating their grav thrusters at the last second. They landed without a sound, rolling into position. The breach had begun. Inside the Nexus, Dominion Overseer Talaric floated within the central chamber, his mind linked to the endless stream of thoughts flooding in from across the Empire. He could feel the growing unrest in the outer colonies, the paranoia gripping the warlords after the Dalzan massacre. It pleased him. Fear was a tool. The weak turned on each other, but the strong, those who embraced the Dominion's will, emerged victorious. The High Archon would purge the weak, and the Empire would remain whole. Then, something changed. A ripple, a distortion in the psionic current. Talric's eyes snapped open. He extended his mind outward, searching for the anomaly. A presence. Intruders. He reached for the security systems, but the moment his mind touched the control relays, darkness. The entire chamber shut down. Talaric gasped, his connection severed. He turned toward the entrance just as the first human operative appeared, materializing from nothing, rifle raised. A single suppressed shot ended him before he could scream. Dax and his team moved quickly, navigating through the Nexus's labyrinthine corridors. They had trained for this moment. Every step, every movement was calculated. "Rhea, status." Dax whispered. "Systems are down," she replied, her fingers dancing across her wrist console. "The whole complex is blind, but we don't have long. I need 5 minutes to trigger the core overload." Dax glanced down the corridor, watching as Dominion guards began moving toward them. The enemy didn't know what was happening yet, but they would soon. He raised his blade. "Then we hold the line." The first wave of guards rounded the corner, and the killing began. On the bridge of the Oblivion, Admiral Elias Voss watched the countdown. The infiltration team was inside. The Dominion was blind, but something felt wrong. "Sir," a comms officer said urgently, "we're picking up another signal from Jalen. It's like they knew we were coming." Voss's jaw tightened. Then the alarms blared. Dominion fleets emerging from hyperspace. A tactical officer shouted, "They're surrounding us." A cold chill ran through Voss's spine. They had been betrayed. The Oblivion rocked violently as the Dominion fleet emerged from hyperspace. Waves of energy smashed against its hull, sending sparks and shockwaves rippling through the ship. The Phantom Legion's flagship had been caught off guard, its cloaking systems still engaged as the full might of the Dominion war machine surrounded them. Admiral Elias Voss stood tall, his face a mask of calm beneath the chaos. "Status report." The comms officer, still struggling to maintain control of the system, looked up, panic clear in her eyes. "We've been outflanked, sir. Their fleets have us surrounded. It's a trap." Voss's mind raced. They had been deceived. The Dominion had known about the attack on the psionic nexus. Someone within the legions had tipped them off. But who? And why? Rourke's voice broke through the tension, as calm as ever. "Admiral, it's not over yet. We can still make it to the jump point if we engage their flanks. We'll need to cut through their lid ships." Voss's eyes narrowed as he stared at the projection of the encircling fleet. The Dominion had anticipated their every move. This wasn't just a counterattack. This was a calculated retribution. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Voss ordered, his voice hard. "We need to buy the team on the ground more time. Helm, plot an escape vector." Rourke stepped closer. "You think they'll make it? The team in the Nexus?" Voss's gaze turned cold. "They have no choice but to succeed." Back within the psionic nexus, the infiltration team was deep inside enemy territory. cutting through guards with lethal precision. Their mission was simple: destroy the core systems of the Nexus, overload its generators, and cause a catastrophic failure that would cripple the Dominion's control over the galaxy. But time was slipping away, and their escape was no longer certain. Lieutenant Rhea Jass's fingers danced across her wrist console, working quickly despite the mounting tension. Almost there, just a few more seconds. Her eyes darted between the screens and the team. The remaining Dominion forces were closing in, reinforcements flooding the Nexus's lower levels. 5 minutes is too long, Dax growled, checking his rifle and peering down the corridor. He signaled to his team, "Hold them back for as long as you can. I'm going to set the charges." The others nodded, knowing what had to be done. Rhea and the others fell into position, forming a perimeter as the Dominion soldiers closed in on them. Dax moved swiftly toward the central core, his mind focused only on one thing: taking the Nexus down before it was too late. But just as he approached the control center, the very walls seemed to shift. An overwhelming pulse of psionic energy slammed into Dax, sending him to his knees. He gasped, trying to block the mental onslaught, but it was everywhere. He could hear the thoughts of countless Dominion soldiers flooding into his mind. They were no longer just enemies. Now, they were voices in his head. He struggled to rise, shaking the invasive thoughts out of his mind, but something else lingered. The presence wasn't just attacking them. It was waiting, watching, analyzing. Rhea's voice crackled through his comm. "Dax, we've got company, big company." Before Dax could respond, a shadow stepped out of the darkness. The figure was tall, cloaked in shadow, and its presence felt otherworldly. The air itself seemed to shimmer around them as they raised their hand. Dax felt a sudden pressure on his mind, a psychic grip pulling at him from all directions. "I knew you would come." The voice was low, filled with ancient power. "You thought you could disrupt our empire. Foolish humans." Dax's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just any psionic force. This was an Archon, the very psionic commander of the Dominion. With every ounce of strength left in his body, Dax pushed back, mentally severing the connection as the Archon advanced. He activated the detonation device strapped to his chest, the countdown beginning in the blink of an eye. The Archon's eyes locked onto his. "Do you believe this will change anything?" Dax smiled, grim and resolute. "This is just the beginning." As the Archon lunged at him, the explosion inside the Nexus tore the entire structure apart, sending shockwaves through the planet's core. On the Oblivion, the impact of the explosion sent ripples through the fleet. The Dominion's psychic link shattered, and their fleets faltered in the wake of the cataclysmic failure. Voss allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction as the comms officer confirmed the Nexus's destruction. "We've done it," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "Now we escape," Voss replied, his eyes already shifting to the battle at hand. The Dominion had not yet been broken, but they would be. This was just the first crack in their empire, and the Phantom Legions would be there to exploit it. The explosion from the psionic nexus reverberated across the stars. It was a shockwave that rattled the very foundations of the Dominion, leaving its entire psychic network crippled and its communications thrown into chaos. The loss was catastrophic. Chalun was now vulnerable, its once unstoppable psychic command broken. The Phantom Legions had achieved the impossible. They had struck at the heart of the Dominion, and the galaxy would never be the same. But victory was fleeting. On the Oblivion, Admiral Elias Voss stood on the bridge, his face illuminated by the flickering lights of the damaged console in front of him. The Dominion fleet had tightened its grip around them, its once considered invincibility now faltering, but it had not yet collapsed. They were surrounded. They had achieved their objective, but at what cost? "Admiral," Commander Work's voice cut through the silence. "The fleet is holding, but we're taking fire from all sides. We need to make the jump to phase space. Now, or we're finished." Voss's eyes flickered over the tactical display. They were out of options. His heart raced, but his mind was sharp. The Oblivion was not just another warship. It was a ghost. It could slip through the cracks of reality and vanish, a shadow in the darkness. "Plot the jump," Voss ordered. "Get us out of here, Rourke." The comms officer's voice was tense. "The engines are critical, sir. The jump will take everything we have left. We won't have enough power to fight our way out if they track us." "We don't need to fight," Voss replied, voice like steel. "We need to disappear." As the Oblivion began its countdown to escape, a deep rumble shook the ship. The Dominion had launched a full-scale attack, hurling everything they had toward them. Their weapons struck the Oblivion's shields, sending shocks through the hull. But still, the ship held. The phase space drive was primed. Then, without warning, a massive blast slammed into the Oblivion, throwing everyone to the floor. The hull buckled, and the lights went out. "We're leaking power," the engineering officer shouted, struggling to remain calm. "The jump drive is offline. We can't." Before the officer could finish, the ship lurched again. This time, it wasn't just the impact of enemy fire. The Dominion fleet had activated their own devastating weapon, a psionic pulse powerful enough to destabilize the ship's core. "Initiating manual override," Voss shouted, his heart hammering in his chest. He reached for the emergency controls, praying the Oblivion's emergency systems could hold together long enough for them to escape. Another pulse ripped through the ship. Systems flickered, then went dark. The Oblivion was dying in real time. Voss's eyes locked with Rourke's. They both knew there was no going back. "Get to the escape pods," Voss barked, voice commanding as ever. "This ship is going down." Rourke nodded, already moving toward the rear hatch, but before he could take another step, a massive explosion rocked the ship once more. The floor tore open beneath them. In an instant, a wall of fire consumed the bridge. Back on Jolun, the shock of the Nexus's destruction had barely begun to fade when the Dominion forces scrambled to regroup. Grand Archon Zalvath stood in his war room, his clenched fists trembling with fury as he stared at the tactical display. The entire galaxy had felt the impact of the psionic Nexus's fall. Jolun's control over the Empire was shattered, its psychic web shredded. The Dominion was in disarray. His warlords stood around him, their faces masks of panic. "My lord," one of them said, his voice shaky. "The fleets, they're losing coordination. Their psionic shields have failed. Our enemies have cut off our most vital link." Zalvath's eyes narrowed. "You underestimate them," he growled, voice cold as ice. "The humans thought they could cripple us with a single blow. They forget who we are." The Archon turned to face his remaining generals. "We will strike back, and we will burn them from the galaxy." He turned toward his chief telepath, a towering figure with dreadlocks woven into intricate designs that flowed with psionic energy. "Summon the high psionics. It's time to end this farce." As the telepath nodded and departed, Zalvath turned back to the star map, his gaze filled with an intense resolve. He would rebuild the Dominion, but this time, no one would be able to question its might. The humans had broken his empire. Now it was his turn to break them. On the fringes of the battlefield, the surviving Phantom Legion's operatives struggled to regroup. Captain Dax Voss was among them, his body bruised but still alive. His breath came in ragged gasps as he watched the flames of battle flicker across the void, the remnants of the Oblivion disappearing into the stars. The mission had been a success, but their sacrifice had cost them dearly. "Did we win?" Rhea asked, her voice hoarse. Dax looked to the stars, the battle raging around them. The answer was clear, but it was also incomplete. "We've started a war," Dax said, "but the Dominion's not finished. We'll need everything we've got to finish this." As the shattered remnants of the Phantom Legions regrouped, they knew one thing. They had not won yet, but they would. The silence after the battle was deafening. The remnants of the Oblivion drifted like a broken ghost, its once proud hull scarred and battered. Captain Dax Voss stood at the edge of the ship's bridge, staring out at the stars as the remains of the Phantom Legions regrouped in the void. The loss of the flagship had been devastating, but the greater victory, destroying the psionic nexus, had sent shockwaves through the Dominion. "We didn't just wound them," Rhea Jazz said quietly, standing beside him, her voice hoarse from the battle. "We crippled them. The Dominion won't recover from this quickly. It'll take years to rebuild their psionic network." Dax nodded, his face grim. The Oblivion's destruction had come at a high cost, but it had also left a gap in the Dominion's command structure, one that the Phantom Legions were determined to exploit. "We've disrupted their empire, but we're not out of the woods yet," Dax said. "The Dominion will come after us with everything they have. Their response will be brutal." A low hum reverberated through the deck as the remaining fleet of stealth ships began to regroup, their crews already working to repair what they could. The Phantom Legions were not a traditional military force. They were guerrilla fighters, assassins, and saboteurs who thrived in the shadows of the galaxy, but even they would need time to rebuild, to reorganize. "Admiral Voss," a voice broke into his thoughts. It was Commander Rourke, his face drawn and tired. "We've received a transmission. It's a direct call from the Resistance on Farallon." Dax raised an eyebrow. Farallon. The planet was a distant colony world in the Outer Rim, one of the few places still outside Dominion control after the recent upheaval. "Yes, sir. They've been waiting for this moment. They say they have new intel. Something big is coming, and it involves the Dominion's retaliation." Dax's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." Moments later, the hologram of a grizzled figure appeared on the communications display. It was a resistance leader named Ilara Trask, a seasoned fighter with a reputation for resourcefulness. Her face was weathered, marked by years of struggle, but her eyes were sharp. "Admiral Voss," she said, her voice low but resolute. "I have intel on a new weapon the Dominion is developing, a weapon that could change the entire course of this war." Dax straightened, his curiosity piqued. "What kind of weapon?" Ilara's expression darkened. "The Dominion has been working on a planet-destroying device, one that uses psionic energy to tear apart entire systems. They've already tested it once, and the results were catastrophic. They plan to unleash it across the galaxy, and our sources say it's nearly ready." The room went still, the weight of her words sinking in. A psionic weapon capable of obliterating entire planets would give the Dominion the power to crush any opposition in a matter of days. The balance of the war was already fragile, and this weapon could tip it entirely in the Dominion's favor. "We need to stop them," Dax said, his voice hard. "Where is it being developed?" "Near the heart of the Dominion's military complex," Ilara replied. "A facility on Draconis 7, a desolate moon on the edge of Dominion space, but it's heavily guarded. Getting there will be impossible without more help." "We'll give you the help you need," Dax replied. "Prepare your forces. We'll rendezvous at the edge of Dominion space." After the transmission ended, Dax turned to Rhea and Rourke. "We can't let them complete this weapon. If the Dominion unleashes it, we'll be wiped out." Rhea nodded. "How do we get to Draconis 7? It's a fortified system." "We don't have to get through their defenses head-on," Dax said, already formulating a plan. "We've made our name by striking from the shadows. We'll need to infiltrate, sabotage their power grid, and destroy their weapon before they know we're even there." Rourke smirked, his eyes glinting with dark amusement. "Sounds like the kind of fight we've been waiting for." Dax turned toward the rest of the crew, his expression resolute. "Prepare for a long journey. The Dominion may be wounded, but they are not defeated, and if we're going to stop them, we'll need everything we've got. No one can know we're coming. The fate of the galaxy depends on us." As the crew worked to prepare for the mission, Dax stood in the command center, staring out into the vast expanse of space. The road ahead would be perilous, filled with traps and enemies who would stop at nothing to see the Phantom Legions wiped out. But they had a purpose now. They had a chance to deal the Dominion a blow that might just turn the tide of the war. And Dax knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The Phantom Legions had started something they could never turn back from. The galaxy was on fire, and there would be no peace until the Dominion had been brought to its knees. The Oblivion slipped into the shadows of space, its engines barely a whisper in the vast void. The remaining Phantom Legion's fleet followed in formation, their stealth ships cloaked against detection, cutting a silent path through the edges of Dominion space. Every member of the crew knew what was at stake. This wasn't just another mission. This was their last shot to cripple the Dominion before their devastating new weapon could be deployed. Admiral Elias Voss stood at the helm of the Oblivion, staring at the star map that blinked softly on the holotable before him. His eyes flicked over the coordinates that marked Draconis 7, the moon on the edge of Dominion territory where the weapon was being developed, the planet-destroying device. Rhea Jas stood beside him, her face drawn but determined. "We got about 3 hours before we reach Draconis 7. Once we're there, we'll need to disable their outer defenses and launch the attack. No time to waste." Voss nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. His mind raced through contingencies. He had no illusions about the danger. This wasn't going to be a clean, easy strike. The Dominion had reinforced the facility to an extent that made it nearly impenetrable. But they had one advantage: the element of surprise. "We don't have the numbers to overpower them head-on," Rourke added, stepping into the room, his voice calm yet laced with an edge of determination. "We'll have to rely on speed and precision. One mistake, and we're done." Voss's gaze hardened. "That's not an option. This mission is everything." He looked up at the team gathered around him. "Rhea, you'll lead the infiltration team. Get to the core of the facility and plant the charges. We'll need you in and out fast. Rourke, you're on the communications blackout. Jam their sensors the moment we get into range." The mission's enormity hung in the air, but each operative nodded in agreement. The plan was simple, yet fraught with peril. If they could disable the power systems and plant the charges in the facility's heart, they would ensure the Dominion's weapon never saw the light of day. "Let's move, people," Dax said, his voice low and commanding. "This is our only chance." Hours later, the fleet arrived at the outskirts of Draconis 7's orbit, shrouded in darkness. The moon loomed ahead, an icy ball of rock and metal, its surface scarred by the military complex that had been built beneath its surface. It was heavily guarded, but the Dominion had no idea the Phantom Legions were about to descend upon it. The Oblivion fell into position, its stealth systems working at full capacity to hide them from Dominion sensors. Around it, the smaller ships slipped into formation, invisible, deadly. Initiating the jam, Rourke's voice came through the comms, cold and precise. "Sensors are down. We're blind." Voss didn't hesitate. "Rhea, now's your time." With a sharp nod, Rhea and her team launched from the Oblivion in a series of rapid, darting ships designed for infiltration. They descended toward the planet's surface, the facility's energy shields buzzing in the distance. They were on the clock, every second counting toward the success or failure of their mission. As Rhea and her team landed on the surface, they moved swiftly, using their cloaking devices to avoid the outer guard posts. The cold, metallic landscape of Draconis 7 stretched out before them, the facility's towering structure just ahead. The air was thin, and the ground trembled with the power of Dominion military machinery beneath their feet. "We're in position," Rhea whispered, scanning the facility's perimeter through her visor. "We'll have to breach the outer doors and move fast once we're inside." Dax's voice came over the comms. "You've got this, Rita. We're with you every step of the way." Her team crept toward the facility's entrance, every movement calculated. They'd breached the door, slicing through security with practiced efficiency. The dark hallways inside were eerily quiet, but Rhea knew that the Dominion would be ready for them at any moment. They couldn't afford to make a sound. They pressed on, planting explosives along critical points, moving deeper into the heart of the complex. Back on the Oblivion, Voss paced the command deck, the tension mounting as every minute passed. Their fleet remained hidden in the shadows, ready to provide support if needed. Suddenly, an explosion shook the comms. Rhea's voice broke through, urgent but steady. "We're inside. Charges are set. Heading to the core now. Prepare for the extraction signal." "Copy that," Voss replied. "We'll be ready to pull you out the moment you're clear. Be quick." Rhea's team reached the core of the facility, a massive underground chamber lined with high-tech machinery. In the center, a massive psionic reactor pulsed with an unnatural, eerie light. This was the heart of the Dominion's weapon, a weapon capable of destroying entire planets with a single burst of psionic energy. "Plant the charges," Rhea ordered, her eyes never leaving the reactor. "We can't let them finish this." The team worked with methodical precision, placing explosive charges around the core. But as they worked, alarms began blaring, signaling their presence. The Dominion was onto them. "Time's up," Rhea said, her voice tight. "Everyone out, now." The facility began to tremble, and the team sprinted toward the extraction point, the countdown echoing in their ears. The Oblivion's ships were already on standby, waiting for the signal to extract them. Just as Rhea and her team reached the surface, the core detonated in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave tore through the facility, crumbling the Dominion's weapon and sending it spiraling into oblivion. The Phantom Legions had succeeded, but the war was far from over. The Dominion would be back, and the Phantom Legions would be waiting.